this artwork here provoke fantasy to rise up, or to feel a little bit of magic.
What is beyond these colors? It's inviting me to come and play.
If you see it as the beginning of everything, it gives you strength for going forward.
In the middle of the painting, it is there, and it's saying, hello, I am zero. Infinity is somewhere around.
Hello, welcome everybody at the VU Art Science Gallery. My name is Bende Wallert and I'm the art curator of the Vrije Universiteit, and I'm also responsible for this VU Art Science Gallery. And today we present to you our first art and science event. Due to corona restrictions, we do it hybrid this time. So we have our speakers here at the gallery. We are very happy that you can join us from home via the chat. And the show will also be recorded, so if you miss some parts, don't worry, because you can see it back later. Before I introduce to you the speakers and the program of today, I would like to take this opportunity to inform you a little bit about this new gallery and the background of this gallery. The gallery is part of the arts policy of the Vrije Universiteit. The Vrije Universiteit is already bringing contemporary art to its campus from the late 60s. So we organize exhibitions, we give assignments for location-based artworks, and we're also building up an art collection, which we show on the campus. And in November 2021, so that's very recently, we opened this new VU Art Science Gallery, and the gallery is situated in the new building, which is a building in the center of the VU campus. And in the new building, which is a multifunctional building, you can also watch theater and movies, and there's also a gallery, so it's kind of the cultural hotspot of the VU campus. So actually it's the nicest place here. The program of this VU Art Science Gallery is totally dedicated to the interaction of art and science. And by science, we don't mean only the exact science, but all kind of research fields. We combine them with artworks from contemporary artists. So 2 to 3 times a year, we invite artists and scientists to share their research with us in this gallery on a certain topic. And so for instance, this first exhibition, Zero, starting from zero, is all about, of course, the number 0. And besides an exhibition, we also organize these interactive events. Why do we do this? We do this as we believe that art and science complete each other. While science is more about data and is art more about experiencing. And we think we need to combine all kind of knowledge to have a better understanding of ourselves. And also a multidisciplinary approach is really needed to face all the current issues of our time. So we have to bring together all kind of knowledge, and not only from the artists and the scientists, but also from the audience. So we're really happy that you join us today to share your insights with us. And in our endeavors as the gallery, we also work with partners. And for this first edition, we have worked with several partners. For instance, we worked with the Art Science Lab, Hybrid Forms of Raoul Fraser. He will talk about that later. And also with Clue Plus, which is an interfaculty research institute of the VU. And this is also part of a bigger project, which is called Studiotopia, and it's an art science project which brings together all kinds of art and science collaborations in Europe. And also for this theme Zero and the knowledge about that, we work together with the Zero Origin Foundation, which is an association which is dedicated to investigation of the origin of the number 0. And last but not least, we also worked with Kunstlicht, which is an academic journal, and they made an issue especially for this show, and it's called Shunya, starting from 0, and it just came out and it's for sale, so you can check the website if you're interested in that. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the partners for this great first edition, and I would also like to thank the speakers who are here today, and I will introduce you to them to you. So first we are going to listen to Maria Miccoli. She is the assistant curator of this first exhibition, 0 starting from 0. And then we will listen to Raoul Fraser. He's the director of the Art Science Lab, Hybrid Forms, and he will introduce to you the video project, which is also part of this edition. And then we are going to watch and discuss the 4 movies, and we are going to talk about that with some of the artists and scientists that are here. Nicky Assmann, Robert Leegte, Evelina Domnitch Dmitry Gelfand, and the scientist Van Fokkink, who was joining us online. He's the professor of theoretical computer science, and Florian Schreck, professor of experimental physics. And this discussion will be moderated by Katja Kwastek, who is the professor of modern and contemporary art history here at the Vrije Universiteit. And you can also participate online by chat, and the chat is going to be moderated by Sam Bannenberg. And last but not least, I just wanted to say we have a little break at 4:45 until 5, and we will end around 6. But first we go to the part where Maria will give you a tour through the exhibition. And I want to say that the exhibition can be seen until the end of February, because we have extended it also due to the corona issues. So let's go and watch the video of Maria.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the exhibition Starting from 0 here at the Fu Art Science Gallery. This exhibition really focuses on the number 0, which is extremely complex and multi-phased as a concept, both mathematically wise and philosophically wise. And for this reason, we really wanted to investigate this number from multiple perspectives here into the exhibition. So I'm going to guide you through our art space and show you a few artworks. But before that, I would like to ask you, have you ever paused for a second thinking about how much 0 is present in our lives? If you just think about the role that digital technologies has in mediating reality nowadays, for instance, or the use that we do of portable devices to relate to reality itself, it goes without saying that, of course, 0 has a predominant role in our everyday routine, but we really don't pay attention to it. We almost give it for granted because it's such an elusive and intangible concept that it's really hard to grasp and to pay attention to. Therefore, we really wanted to give the audience an idea of what this concept of philosophical and mathematical 0 stand for. Especially because although we give it for granted today, it took really a lot of time for Western European societies to include this number into our numeral system. Indeed, historians agree on claiming that 0 as a mathematical number started to be used around the 3rd, 4th century AD, particularly in India. And early Indian mathematicians borrowed from metaphysics and from religion, such as the Rig Veda, the Sanskrit terms to denote 0. And among these terms, there are 2 particular terms that are really important to understand how this concept is really deep and multi-phased. And these 2 terms are specifically the term Sunya, which stands for nothingness and void, and the term Ananta, which stands for infinity. Paying attention to these 2 terms, we can really understand how how zero holds in itself this ontological duality as nothingness and infinity and as unity and multiplicity, that is really fundamental to understand better the exhibition concept itself. Although this connection with this idea of infinity, actually Western European societies really look at this number skeptically. Indeed, it took a lot of time to zero to get its way through us, which happened around the 13th century when Italian mathematician Leonardo Fibonacci started to use and to include incorporating zero into his own research. But it took more than 2 other centuries for this number to be widely used from us and into our numeral system, which happened eventually around the 15th century. But still, during this time, of course, a lot of things changed and developments were done, and especially from the adoption of zero into our numeral systems, a lot of scientific developments happened. For instance, if we just think about all the developments in scientific disciplines such as quantum physics or quantum mechanics or general relativity at the beginning of the 20th century, it goes without saying that this number has been really fundamental for a lot of developments. But also into modern language, the adoption of this way of saying, such as starting from zero, as the title of the exhibition itself suggests, it's a kind of a wish for a new start. So this possibility of restart from this blank page that is actually full of possibilities. Therefore, for this depth of the concept of zero, we really wanted to give to this exhibition multiple entanglements. And to do that, if you want to just follow me, so although Western European societies really look at this connection of zero to this idea of philosophical void and emptiness, we really wanted to pay homage actually to this ontological duality that zero holds in itself. Therefore, the exhibition featured this beautiful installation by Jennifer T called the Atom Series from 2016, in which the artist really merged the reflection on the origin of abstract art, which is exemplified by the drawings of Ilma af Klimt that the artist recalls in her artwork by this abstract artist that realized this series at the beginning of the 20th century with the language of the Taoist diagram. So very much as the concept of shunya, also in the Taoist diagrams, opposite forces occur into the creation and shaping the reality itself. So this is something that is really related to zero. Specifically, if we think that in this specific installation, the physical and material language of sculpture really merges and dialogue with this intangible experience, which is the philosophical meditation. And speaking of intangible things that zero really makes visible, I will invite you to join me to the next artworks. Which are here on display and that have been made by artist Robert Leegte, both from 2020, in the blink of an eye and drawing on a bottom. So what we really wanted to do and to investigate through this exhibition was also, of course, the role that digital technologies has in mediating reality nowadays. And this is really something timely, but also that the artist Robert Leegte really investigates into his own art, and specifically into these 2 artworks that are put here almost into dialogue, the one with the other one. So we have, on one hand, the performativity of the machine. So this average smartphone is instructed to count during a human eye blink. And on the opposite side, we have the performativity of the human beings, of the artists that reappropriate of the gesture of drawing, but always playing with this perception and with these 2 buttons, which can stand for the on and off, the 1 and zeros, and true and null. So we still have this reflection about this subtle membrane that separates the offline from the online realm. And the question might be at this point, especially in this pandemic, post-pandemic, if we can call like this, this specific moment, can we really make a distinction between the online and the offline realms? And these 2 realms are really separate the one from another, or they are completely merged as things are right now. So this playing in perception is really present here in this artwork. especially in this series blink of an eye, where we can finally see what's behind the user interface. So of course, being at the base of binary code, 0 is the founding language of binary systems, and so of computer technologies. But here, something so untangible such as the digits that are present behind the user interface become a sculptural object. So there is this game also between this intangibility and also physicality of the material itself in this series, in the blink of an eye. As a bottom line, all artworks displayed in this exhibition have the quality of making things that we cannot really see perceivable and visible. And this is something that is really deeply related to the concept of 0 itself. Indeed, I would like to invite you discovering this cabin in which, very much in line with the scientific discoveries made possible by 0, specifically concerning quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and general relativity, which are all fields that occur in studying phenomena such as black holes. 0 has been fundamental, and thanks to this collaboration between this artist duo, composed by Evelina Domnitch and Dmitry Gelfand, with Ligo, Marc Chaumin, and also with William Basinski, that made the soundtrack of this installation called ER is APR from 2017, we can really have the perception of what happens when two rotating black holes really create each other. Well, the introduction of the number 0, of course, has been fundamental for the development of scientific fields such as quantum physics, quantum mechanics, or general relativity, which both occur into studying phenomena such as black holes. And these black holes, which temperature is estimated being the absolute 0, are this huge region of the time space which gravitational pull really drag with it everything, and nothing can escape their pull, not even light. So when it comes to such a huge phenomenon that respond to this extreme physics law, our mind and imagination is really challenged. And of course, it's really hard to imagine such a phenomenon. So in this installation, we can really play with this perception, as well as black holes themselves play with human perception of reality and how it is represented. So speaking about playing with perception, we are now going to visit the last but not least artwork of the exhibition, starting from 0. So here we are with the last artwork on display in the exhibition, and this artwork really recalls this avant-garde movement 0 group, which was formed after the Second World War in Düsseldorf. And the artists that founded this movement really wanted to name itself 0 group, because 0 stands for this ground, from this blank page, which is full of possibilities for a new beginning. And this was very much needed, especially after the destruction of the Second World War, when it was needed to rebuild destructed cities, but also to start again to experiment in art. So the group really started to experiment with materials, really poor materials, such as the aluminum foil, playing with perception, investigating how these materials interact with light and movement, for instance, creating these beautiful optical artworks in which colors are really predominant. But still, they also experimented with performances and with happenings in the late 1960s, 50s, beginning of 1960s. And the artist, the author of this installation that is called Solaris, and it's from 2013, the author is Nicky Assmann, and the author really is influenced by the reflection of the 0 group on colors, movements, and light. Indeed, her installation, Solaris, really plays with our perception, but it really also occupies a physical space. And as we can see from the subtle screens in which these beautiful colors appear, we can also can relate this artwork to the idea of expanded cinema, but also to visual music. And these beautiful colors that the artist calls hypercolors are always different and really can remind you this duality of zero as nothingness and infinity. But also, if we pay attention of how subtle these screens are, we can also reflect on the ephemerality of our existence and of nature itself, since it's also an investigation that the author is really much into conducting through her artworks. But still, if we get close to the artworks, the performativity of the medium and of these screens is something that also is combined with the interaction of the beholder with the artworks itself, which stands not only with the physical interaction, so we just cannot play with the machine while spinning it round, but we can also reflect our image within the machine itself. Therefore, very much as the concept of sunyata, where both the subjects and the objects merge and are made by the same substance, by reflecting our image into the artwork, we can ask, is this artwork also standing for sunya? So it is also something that can be related to the artwork itself. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you will enjoy our event.
Yes, hello everybody. Welcome with this part on the VU Art Science Laboratory. My name is Raoul Fraser, and I'm one of the founders of that laboratory. It's a great pleasure to be here also with Evelina Domnitch and Dmitry Gelfand, because they were also co-founders of that laboratory 5 years ago. And why did we start such a laboratory? Well, we wanted to do research together. There was the Dutch Science Foundation also recognized the need for artists and designers to co-create or collaborate with scientists. And they funded a project for us, also with another artist, Ivan Henriques, and also with a postdoc, Vincent Friebe. And in order to execute our project, we started a laboratory, a physical space at the Physics and Astronomy department. Nowadays, that laboratory has become a little bit bigger. More artists have been working there, also on projects. And what I think is special about this laboratory is that the artists and the scientists are both working at the university equally. So it's not an artist doing a residency with a scientist, but they are basically fellow researchers, just like a scientist is also a researcher in such a specific project. And I'm very happy that Dmitry and Evelina's artwork is also now visible at the VU Art Gallery. I think it's quite unique in the Netherlands, but maybe there are also not many places in the world where universities have a art science laboratory and an art science gallery just on the same spot. And it is becoming more and more recognized that these type of collaborations really have value, can create impact on the participants, on the scientists and the artists, but also on society, create innovations, encourage discussions, and also critical reflections on technology, for instance. And in one of such projects we are now also participating. It's called Studiotopia. And that is a European-wide project where several artists and many scientists participate. And it's a bit of in the program, what we try to do is to basically flip the hierarchy. So there are many artists that work with scientists, not in special dedicated labs, but in the laboratories of the scientist, him or herself. But then there's always a bit of a hierarchy. So the artist has to be very happy to be invited and has to have a very special project that is very much of interest of that particular scientist. It's always very difficult for artists to get a foot between the door. And in order to flip that hierarchy, we and also many of our European partners thought to flip that and to create a scientist in residency. So here a scientist is actually taking up a residency with the artist to reflect also on their art, but also maybe to make art, to contribute to work of the artist, maybe to make work of their own. We don't know. At least what we like that there's a start of a conversation, that people start to learn from each other, and that it's a journey. And maybe, and as part of that type of journey and that type of conversation, we decided also to have an intervention in the art exhibition here at the VU. where scientists were invited to visit the artworks, to look at it, to reflect on it, and they were recorded by video crew, by camera crew. And what you're about to see is a series of the clips of this much longer videos that we made of their response, also for analysis, but now also for your viewing. It's a bit as if you have a companion as you are looking at the artworks. One of the scientists that is working at the VU or in Amsterdam is your companion, and you are just listening to the ideas of the thoughts of such a scientist on the works. So we hope that you will enjoy those videos, and we will talk about that after we have watched them.
What is beyond these experiences? What is beyond these colors? It's inviting me to come and play. Okay, this is nice. Now I'm really feeling like a child, enjoying the colors. So many nice colors. They are finding their own path in the whole universe. It also reminds me of our own movements from childhood to, grown up. Because there are so many movements and you can't predict the movements. Because there is no movement up, up, up like a linear path. Sometimes it's like you are walking and you think, oh, I'm reaching something, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm falling. Same like these colors. Some are moving up, some are falling down. But you have to enjoy it, because otherwise you will become crazy, thinking, oh, I have to reach something. But spirituality is not about reaching something. It's being. I think this work, the nice thing is that it invites to play. So you become a child and everyone likes that. So you don't have to put too many words to it. But if you want to analyze, then you have to see, okay, how much is a person open to that space of happening? Because if you are really control-oriented, you want to have a certain output and that conviction that this is my space to put this input, to have that output, then you don't give space to that happening. And then it can become a bit too much confronting, because you don't know what can happen even in a second. It isn't happening because I can't do anything to say this is what I do and this would be the output. The patterns, the colors, they happen. But at the same time, there is this interaction, that interbeing. And at the same time, it's kind of giving me space to be. For me, it was inviting to go to the boundless realm of infinity. And I also saw the bubbles, and that reminded me of zero. To me, zero is in the middle between infinity and form, an unmanifested realm in us. And I think this work reminds me of that realm. Zero is like home in spirituality. And I like being at home, as everyone. It's a nice experience to connect, to interact with Solaris. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the first film. My name, as Wendy said already, is Katja Kwastek. I'm professor of contemporary art history here at Freie Universität, and what I want to do in the next hour, where we have a break in between, but in total it's going to be an hour, to discuss these different films. We are going to screen the films, and then I'm going to discuss them with the artists or the scientists, or both. That depends a bit on each of the films. So this first film that you just saw is filming Shada Nandram, who is professor of Hindu spirituality and society at our Faculty of Religion and Theology. And what we asked her, and that's actually what we asked all of the scientists that we invited into the gallery, is to really come with a fresh reaction on the artworks without also having researched too much on them beforehand. So that's maybe important to know. And they also haven't had any discussions with the artists before, apart from in the last work that Raoul already talked about by Dmitry and Evelina. But we're going to come back to that later. So one thing maybe still to mention also about Shada Nandram is that she is really closely involved in that project of the Zero Origin Foundation. So she was really also the link of this project, or one of the links of this project, with that research project of on the origin of Zero. But now I'm really happy to say hello to Nikki Asmann, who is here with us today, the artist of the work that you just saw and that Maria also played a bit with during her guided tour. So welcome. Maybe we can ask with just you saying, well, how did you feel about that interpretation by Shada Nandram? How did you?
Yeah, it was I really liked this interpretation, and where I could connect with her also is that she sees it as this. So the soap film is sort of like a window, a portal, an intervention in the space, and for me this connects to this concept of zero, that you have something before and after. It's dividing literally the space, and how she connects it to infinity is quite nice. And I think for me it is something that it connects to the in-between. So the in-between is this moment of pause, or in Japan they call it the ma, the negative space. And you also have it in cinema. This work is reference to cinema, with the soap film being this abstract film that plays before you. And I think it is a moment that you are not thinking in the past, you are not thinking in the future, you are in the now, and you are observing and perceiving. And that makes it a very momentary piece. And I think this is what she's also relating to in her comments. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I also found her comments really fascinating, I have to say, also because, well, I'm an art historian, so of course if you would have put me in front of that work, I would have had very different reactions. I would probably have thought of some kind of media archaeology, also with the mechanics, like of scrolling through a film roll, or what you said, like abstract film. Also expanded cinema was already mentioned. So I mean, this of course is a very specific form. What we staged here is a very specific form of art-science interaction, because actually Shada came kind of blank to the work and didn't interact with you much before. But how would you see your relation with scientific research generally? Do you see yourself as someone who is kind of doing artistic research? So is there very much interaction with the exact sciences, as an example, to create these works?
I think what I would call it more is artistic experiments. And I generally start with something that I only know one thing about the work, which triggers me, or one observation. So for instance, with the soap film, I was working with soap bubbles, soap film, and then it was a moment that the sun entered the room where I was working and reflected the colored light of the soap film. And this is what got me into a deeper research of delving into the workings of the light, iridescence, colors, the breaking of the light. And so I think I enter something completely without knowledge, and then I just start to experiment. And sometimes you can approach or you can use the same methodology, like you have a hypothesis, you have a theory, like I think this is, and then you start to change one parameter at a time to get to the same result. But I think I would not, I have also this freedom without being hindered by that it has to be true or that it has to be proven, or so in that sense I wouldn't compare it to a scientific methodology. Yeah, so usually it's one thing that triggers me, which makes me go delve into it deeper, and by experimenting I come to something. And I think I'm not hindered in that aspect, that I'm not limited by what it cannot do or can do, because I just figure this out as I go along.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think what's also really nice, and also what you were saying at the beginning, that of course there is this interest in material, there's this interest in the, like, let's say, chemical properties of soap. But there's also that interest in the more spiritual reflections that it can evoke. And this is what Chada was focusing on. But I'm still wondering if you say, and you're also saying on your website that you're engaged, that you have a background in film and art science. So if you think of art science, for you, would that include something like Hindu spirituality? So
no, I think, and this, I make abstract work, and I think what the nice thing about this is that people can, they have the freedom to connect to the artwork with their own background, mind, associations. And I think it's really nice that everybody has their own perception and experience with the work. And I think for me, it's not so much a spiritual relationship, but more, for instance, I have a background in film, and I make installations that are more in the realm of expanded cinema. So you play with different screens. I make screens from soap film, metal grids, acrylic plates, or LEDs, and then this window, the screen is always this window to which you can be, to which you relate to. And for me, it connects to, in cinema, you are in this dark womb when you are watching a film, and then there's sometimes this moment that you sort of doze off, but not really, and then you snap back into reality, and then you have thought of something completely that you connected to things that you didn't. And I think this is something that also happens for me in the train, for example, and then the window is the train window and the landscape passing by in this certain rhythm, cadence, and then I also tend to connect things that I wouldn't connect before. And the windows of the soap film are for me a sort of similar reaction. I think in this moment of being in the now, you sort of defragmentize things and you connect things unaware of, unconsciously. This is for me what I like about it, and how it relates to cinema. This moment of in between.
Yeah, that's interesting. So is that also, I mean, when you were approached and you learned that this is going to be an exhibition about zero, was that something that was kind of your work would naturally connect to, or did that establish a new possibility of interpretation for you? Because of course I see this idea of the threshold, the limit, that's very close also to some of these interpretations of that number.
So in my work I don't work with the concept of zero, but I do relate it to these screens being like windows or portals that are connecting to this moment of pause or in-betweenness. So for me, the concept of zero relates to this, and you have the before and the after. In the film, you also see she's being filmed from the front and from the back of the soap film, and from the back you don't see any colors, and from the front you see all the colors. So there's this different way of looking at things, and I think it comes together in this thin layer of soap film.
Okay, I think, well, we'll open up to the audience soon, but maybe one last question for me, because I think this is very interesting also with your specific interest in film. So now we have a film, and it shows that they put quite a bit of effort in trying to capture your work on film again. So it's a work that engages with film, that has been filmed in a way that is even slightly artistic in itself. So do you have any reaction on how they staged this?
We both connected. So this work is part of a triptych on soap film. The first being Solaris, a more monumental setup with 2 screens and then automated. So you're a viewer in a space, seeing the 2 large soap films. There's a composition for the 2 large soap films. This is the second piece, Solaris. And the third piece is Liquid Solid, and they all have the word sol referring to the sun in it. And the third piece was me and another artist called Joris Schreibels filming the soap film with a macro lens. And what they did was basically the same, but then we did it in conditions of minus 30 degrees because we wanted to research how the soap film would behave when it was freezing. And they slowed it down in the film. So I think the material is rich enough that you can approach it from different angles, and it's very nice to experiment with. So yeah, I can see it has much more to it than just one artwork.
Okay, thanks so much. Do we have questions from the audience?
We have one question, and that is regarding Maria introduced your work in the tour in the first video we saw, and she mentioned the Zero Group and that you are inspired by the Zero Group, and the question is regarding how has the Zero Group influenced your artistic practice?
So it was not an inspiration for this art piece, but I got acquainted with the work of Otto Pina. So he was a member of the founding member of the Zero movement, and in which, by the way, colors were, it was more black-white, not colors. But he himself, as an individual artist, and his work, I heard him speak just before he died in New York, and the way he talked about his own work and his approach and the work he made, I really connected to this, and he had actually quite. His own work is quite colorful and dealing with the sun, working with the elements and the material. And here, how I work with material is always trying to bring the color that is inherent to the material in this sort of hyper-realistic way forward. And so, yeah, I think this inspiration or kinship or being inspired by is more with this artist that was part of Zero.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that question. That was, it's also, we will see that there is quite a few connections also to earlier artworks, art movements in some of the works. So we will for sure come back also to these more like art historical components in after the break. So now we are going to have a break until 5 o'clock. Thanks for now, and hope you can get some tea or refreshments before coming back.
That's 7. It goes to 7. 700,000.
859,595. I don't know if it starts at 0. Can I go and check? Does it start at 0 or does it start? No, it starts at 1. Damn it. Should have started 0. So that one you expect, since the theme is 0, you expect that the number counting starts at 0. The other one, it took me longer to understand. This is weird. This I feel that three-dimensionality. So this looks like a pressed button, and this looks like one that comes towards me, like switched on, switched off. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept of binary. So things are either 0 or 1. There's one. So we are used to counting from in base 10, but computers think in base 2. So either something is a 0 or a 1. And then you start combining 0 and 1s to represent other numbers. So you can translate all these numbers here, they're in base 10, and you can transform those into base 2 with 0 and 1s, and then you probably have, I don't know how many more panels. I mean, 0 is the beginning of everything, and then little by little you build on top, because in computer science, you start counting at 0, you don't start counting at 1. So whenever you have a list, it starts from 0 and then it goes 1, 2, 3. I associate this a lot with, well, the beginning of everything, the beginning of the universe. At some point, there was a moment 0 for our existence. Zero is exciting if I think of 0 as the beginning of a series and things that will develop and evolve. If I think of 0 as the null and there's nothing, well, that's a bit scary, I think. Actually, that's my feeling. If you see it as the beginning of everything, then it gives you strength. I mean, I can talk for myself, of course, but it gives you strength for going forward.
Okay, so what you just witnessed was, whom you just witnessed actually, was Ilaria Tiddy, who is also working here at the Freie Universität as Assistant Professor Artificial Intelligence. And we asked her to look at, comment upon the work of Jan Robert Leegte, who is here with me today. Welcome, Jan Robert. Great that you're here. You actually have been working in the field of computational art, we could say, since a long while already, but it's, well, also not so quite recently, but since the 2000s that you really also try to not only work on the computer or in internet art, something that is shown on the internet, but really also produce pieces for galleries, right, that can be shown in the gallery. So the first question I have for you is the question that Ilaria also had. Why is it that there is no 0 in that work? Why do the numbers not start with 0?
Yeah, it's a very good point, because, yeah, that's how computers count. But the work is very much, all my work is about the interface and I would say about describing a phenomenology of computers. So it's very, there's just so far you can go as a human being in understanding the computer. And I find it a complete wondrous and fascinating machine and contribution to our reality. And I'm still trying to understand it. And everything behind the interface is basically invisible. It's this ocean of voltages and electrons and in a completely different temporal world and everything. And that is pretty much what the work is about. So the counting is always a gesture to the human. So it's very much like a kid would start 1, 2, 3, 4. So I chose to start with 1 because that is our our way of counting. But yes, I get it. A computer would start at 0.
So it's you were trying to imagine the non-computer scientists looking at the work rather, who would say, well, I start counting with 1, where she immediately as a computer scientist would say, well, I would start counting with 0. So you already did a kind of translation towards a broader public, one could say.
Well, but it's not only that, but I believe there is just the interface. And a computer scientist would say, no, I understand what's happened behind it. But from my point of view, there is only the interface. So, and the interface is always a gesture to the human perceiver, because anything beyond that you can't see. So that is probably the choice I made. And also, if you're a young child will just not get a 0. They just wouldn't understand what it is. So it always starts counting with a 1. So that's our human condition, probably.
Yeah. So we have to read this work. It's 4 panels, right? And the reason that there's kind of a little white space on the last is that we really try to translate that blink of an eye, that moment that an eye, that what a computer could calculate or what a smartphone could calculate while we were looking at it. And that information is just not enough for 4 panels. So
exactly.
That's why.
Yeah.
So it's really trying to show this like moment.
Yeah, because then you really feel it's just a sequence of counting, plus that I usually then just try and find a very, that was your question also, leaving the screen, which again is of course just an interfacial layer, but leaving the computer's domain into a physical work. I usually just try and just follow the logic of these choices. So then you arrive at a point sort of at what size can you print with a certain technique, and that is a certain size of paper. So that is then a limitation. Then then I want like square panels, and then you just follow that. Then you end up with 4 and just ends there. So there's a logic to the choice in what I made this, and I distinctly, and of course it works well. So it makes it very clear, sort of, okay, that's, people instinctively walk there, check it, check the last digit.
That's what's really nice about her reaction, right? That you really feel this idea of, well, I try to get it, I really, you see her thinking in a way and trying to make sense of the work and getting it to a certain point, but then also still staying slightly confused in a way of why really you made these choices. In the work description, it actually says that you have been adding a color gradient to the density scale.
Yeah, I'll try and explain that.
Can you explain that to us?
Well, of course, what I like about this work is its extreme simplicity. So why did I chose iteration? Because iteration is a fundamental, it's a very core principle of a computer. A computer does bit shifting, and iterating is a very pure principle. So if you just give the computer the instruction to iterate, you're really on to the processor. It's a very fundamental thing. Plus that if you would take an algorithmic concept, it's like the most boring one there is. Sort of, so basically it's an algorithmic art piece, a generative art piece, super boring, counting, just iterating by 1. So this is that very core principle of the computer. Spits this out, but I was really amazed by the texture and the level of detail in the work. So it looks like you're looking at waves in an ocean or something. So, and that is basically just the letter density. So an 8 has a lot of black in it, whereas a 1 has less black, and everything in between has a different grayscale in a way. So you get this play in density, which gives the texture and which produces these wavy lines. What I did, because it's in a way is an algorithmic landscape. I wrote an algorithm for a landscape, which is just iterating, which is sort of ironical. And just to add to the sort of the artistic choice, I created a simple palette of colors based on a photo of in this case, a seascape, but for other ones I did like woodlands or mountain. So I injected colors into the numbers just to sort of make them painterly, as a sort of an artistic, painterly touch to it. Again, very simple, very simple and just this is the end result, sort of a very brutal, simple landscape.
Okay, so many aesthetic choices in the end result also.
Yeah, the size, the color element, but that's about it. It's pretty simple. It's a simple work.
Yeah. So what I also would like to ask you is, well, I already mentioned that you have really, well, you're what we would call a computer artist or a media artist or a new media artist or a digital artist, whatever. It's actually a group of within contemporary art that have been working very close to the exact sciences since a very long while already. I mean, actually since cybernetics, so since the 1950s at least. Still, I would guess that you see, I don't know if you see yourself within this, what is often labeled as an art science field. So how do you see your relation to computer science? Do you see yourself as like needing their help in a way, going back to their theories to understand what you're doing, or are you rather tinkering along with them or even pioneering in your work?
It's a good one. I also summarize my practice very briefly in one sentence to distinguish what I do to a lot of people using computers in art. I say, I don't use software to make art, but I make art about software. So I flip it around, and that concises it pretty neatly. So I see the computer also as a muse. It's literally my point of fascination, and I'm trying to really get it through making art. And by doing that, I'm sort of not that much interested in the engineering per se, because I get it. I know how computers work, but it's from a perceptive point, I don't. And I think that's sort of on a philosophical level, I find it far more interesting, and also like these temporal sort of differences between our temporal cognitive experience and the one of a machine. It's mind-blowing. And whereas, oh, this is how we made it. Yeah, but the actual experience of it is very different. And that I find very interesting. And I've been looking often in, of course, I read my media theory and everything, but often it was much more about media than sort of this sort of philosophical approach. But I have stumbled into philosophers who are sort of writing philosophy about computing and everything, and then that's the part where I find interesting. But usually I just borrow a lot from art historical ways of looking, ways of seeing disciplines and sort of bashing them against the machine and seeing where they stick or where it breaks off. And we were mentioning Eastern philosophy or religion, or there's concepts there which I find very relevant in dealing with the sort of the formativity, the fluidity of the machine, but also its staging solidity, which is something you see a lot in Eastern philosophy as well. So I usually borrow from different fields. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, also, of course, this work is a very philosophical work, for me at least, in that sense. Yeah. And I really like sitting in front of it because it feels so much also what we are doing here, because we are constantly told that we are offline or online during this event. So it's really nice to have that symbolized also behind us. But we don't have so much time anymore. I still wanted to confront you with one statement that we are actually still going to hear, which is by Florian Schreck, who is also in the audience. But in his film that we are still going to watch, he says that while science needs to be precise, in art precision would be boring, and while scientists try to get rid of all the noise, art wants to be misunderstood. Would you, I mean, of course that was said concerning another artwork, but I was just wondering, is that something that you would also see for yourself, that it's not trying to get rid of the noise, but rather featuring it, things like that?
I think what I just said sums it up as pretty well. It's very much about the experience, so it's contemplative in a way, and that is a different approach to understanding. So when you understand something, it in a way it can also flatten it or make it. But the contemplative part is where you feel the actual presence and the differences, and that can be really profound. But that is an experience you have in science as well, a lot. I mean, there's so many profound insights by contemplating contemporary physical theories. They really blow your mind. So there's not that much difference. But I try not to over-explain, but more, yeah, to open a door so people can experience it more directly and just see for themselves what they feel.
Great, thanks so much. Do we have questions from the audience?
We have one, and that's about drawing of a button, and with the question.
Oh, that's great, because I didn't have time to get into that.
The question is which. It's the binary system, and in the video there is said that one is 1 and the other one is 0. But the question is which one is 1 and which one is 0? Which one? What is what? Well, in your interpretation, then, as the artist.
From an interface design point of view, this is the neutral state.
Yeah.
That's the active state.
Yeah.
So that would be the 1 and this would be the 0. But from an aesthetic point of view, you could see that one as a sort of emptiness and there's a fullness. You could flip it around. But I'll leave it up to the viewer as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Jan Robert. And we already have to move to the next film. So, which is going to be about the work of Jennifer T.
As a mathematician, I have the feeling the 0 is staring at me in the face. In the middle of the painting, it is there and it's saying, hello, I am 0. Infinity is somewhere around. My first impression is that I'm walking a little bit to the cosmos. Although the work is called atomic, I have more the feeling I'm looking at planets. It's like the universe. So the artist is looking at a miniature level of atoms, but is drawing it out to a cosmic level. Also, the artworks are trying to express nothingness. It's outer space, there's nothing there, there's only the 0, nothing else. But as a mathematician, it still feels like I'm looking to the two-dimensional space with the 0 in the middle, spreading out, infinity somewhere out of reach. The contrast between 0 and infinity that the artist was trying to express. And so there you see the relationship between 0 and infinity, because if you divide by 0, you get infinity, which is not inside the domain of numbers. And then you could say, well, what I do is I can take infinity and I take it into the real numbers and add it. It's also a real number. This is actually the projective plane. And that's especially what I see with these physical spheres. I have the feeling a little bit like the projective plane. And then also if you do that, then 0 is nicely at the bottom, infinity is nicely at the top. So it also shows the kind of contrast there are, and at the same time the relationship between 0 and infinity. Take a sheet of paper and now start folding it over an apple, so to speak. The mathematician can fold it nicely over the apple, but since it spreads out to infinity, you can get higher and higher and higher and higher, but you never get to this closing point. You go from a non-compact space to a compact space, and that doesn't fit. But you can make it fit by saying, I put the infinity on top. I just close it up by an extra element, and then you get a projective plane. 0 and infinity are basically two sides of the same coin, because they're basically each other's twin brothers. Yeah? They have the same arithmetic properties. Zero is easily forgotten, and you should never forget it. I think what this artwork is expressing is, don't forget me, I am 0, I'm here.
Okay, so we have a bit of a different setting this time because unfortunately Jennifer couldn't make it today. So I will try to provide a bit of context for her work myself. But in this case, we have one Fokkink who reacted to the work. Actually also not here in this room, but online. One, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great,
Hopefully.
welcome. So great you could make it. So let me immediately get started with my first question. And that is, if I'm not fully mistaken, Maria and Wenda had first asked you to actually comment on the work of Jan Robert or to react to it, but you really insisted to engage with Jennifer's work. So why that?
Actually, I didn't understand it in that way, but it's very well possible that I was supposed to comment on Jan Robert's artworks. But I really liked the way that Zero was presented in Jennifer T's work, the kind of abstraction that she was making, and so it appealed to me.
Okay, so you think you would have seen this close relation to Zero in her work also if you wouldn't have come across it in this exhibition context?
No, I think it was really that it was explained, so I looked at the explanations, and this gave me kind of context. Although I was expecting more atomic artworks, and when I looked at it, I also expressed it, it felt more like cosmos to me. But that's also kind of nice, because on the one hand, Jennifer T is having this contrast between zero and infinity, and on the other side, she has this contrast between the atomic level that she's trying to express and the cosmic level that me, as a viewer, is more the impression.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. So maybe as Jennifer cannot be here, we can give a little bit more background also on her work. So she is an artist with a very diverse body of work. Many of you will probably know another work of hers because it's actually shown in the metro station of Amsterdam Central. It's a huge work that is actually a photographic reproduction of a collage that is made from tulip petals, and it's called Navigating the River of the World, where she is referring to actually a ceremonial textile used in Sumatra. I'm just saying that this is of course not what we are discussing here, but it really shows how she's interested in making kind of knowledge systems resonate across time and space. So bringing different cultures, knowledge systems together also from the past, and also different scales. And maybe that's also something you were already referring to, one, that it's this specific work, the Atom series, is about both like the atom and space, so the very small and the very big. What is also interesting, and I was already alluding to this, that we have several works here that also like have references to earlier works in the history of art, because in this work Jennifer T engages with a Swedish painter from the early 20th century, Hilma af Klint, and maybe we can show one of her drawings by Hilma af Klint, her aquarelle drawings, because it really shows how Jennifer T took her works as a kind of starting point to translate the idea of that really pioneering abstract painter of the 1920s, and that's really also something that I think we have to take into account, because we are also talking here about the relation to the sciences and about innovation or ideas in the sciences that are somehow reflected upon by artists. And af Klint was really very early in acknowledging what was happening in physics at the time, which was, of course, a very interesting times within physics, also with all these discoveries around atoms in the early 20th century. And so she had created these drawings, but actually knew that they were so much ahead of their time that she said they shouldn't be published only until after 20 years after her death. So actually she only became known even in the 1980s. I think that's quite interesting how now 100 years later, Jennifer T is going back to these works and transferring their aesthetics into 3 dimensions as a kind of honoring this early artist who was already engaging with scientific discoveries in a way, but also very much restaging them in a different way. And also, as an example, she uses photographs of enlightened matches. So it's really a mix between scientific model, constructivist art exhibition. And So a very broad association, also bringing together of these different knowledge systems, which is typical for her. So to get back to you, sorry for like this kind of lengthy explanation in between. You state several times then in your engagement with the work that as a mathematician, I do read it this and that way. So do you really think that your professional background, your discipline, made you read the work in a very specific way?
In part, yes, because as a mathematician, I've looked very often, for instance, at the projective plane, which what I explained in the movie is a sphere. And so when I see this object, this sphere, it immediately casts me back to this kind of geometrical object I have seen as a mathematician. Also partly because if I sum up my own research in just a few sentences, I'm studying computer systems. Say if you fly a plane, you want to be certain that the software in the plane is correct. But then you have to reason about it as a mathematical object. And in these mathematical objects are zeros and ones, etc. So you have to also make a very precise, abstract representation of that. And in the sense, to go back to the artwork, I could also say that Jennifer T is also trying to do this, but as an artist. So she's trying to make an abstract representation of something very concrete, namely zero, infinity, the natural numbers. And so in that sense, it also resonates with me.
So can you imagine using this work in one of your lectures to explain the concept of infinity to your students?
Yes, I think I could. So also when I give a lecture, I have to explain how you very precisely specify the natural numbers in a different way than you're used to at high school. And I could also imagine then showing this artwork not to really explain the workings of it, but a lecture is also a little bit theater. Especially I'm lecturing to 650 students. That's more theater than lecturing in a sense. And this artwork could really help to bring alive this kind of lecture.
Yeah, in any case, you in your appearance in the film, I think you helped us very much also with your gestures to somehow translate some of the concepts you were alluding to us or to your viewers. So I found that really interesting, and also, I learned a lot from it. So are there questions from the audience then?
No.
No, there are no questions from the audience. So they might have found it illuminating enough, or is there something coming in?
We just come in. Can you, Professor Fokkink, can you please tell us more about between divinity and it just the end of the question was just pulled by the person posting the question. Sorry.
Cecilia, really live.
Yeah, we're really live.
The proof that we are. So I think Maria is also trying to get the question right now.
If I could only read faster.
No, we have time. Just take your time.
No, it isn't here.
It isn't there.
Oh, wait. Can you
See,
please
it's about
tell
visibility
us,
and invisibility.
Now, wait. I'm copying it so we can just read it in our own pace. Can you please tell us more about the relation between dividing and the zero and infinity? Dividing by zero and infinity.
Did you get that question, Van?
Yes, I get it, and I can tell a bit more.
Great.
So when you go to primary school, you're always taught don't divide by zero, because it gives infinity, basically. In Dutch, it said, delen door nul is flauwekul. And actually, it turns out that you can divide by zero, and you can actually give it a value that makes sense. Namely, you can define 1 divided by 0 is 0. This is counterintuitive, but it turns out it mathematically works just fine. So you can make a mathematical framework that works just as we use it, where 1 divided by 0 is equal to 0. Yeah, and that also shows the kind of relationship between 0 and infinity again, because 1 divided by 0 is infinity. But you can also define it is 0. Also in the movie, I say that 0 and infinity have very much the same properties. So they're kind of twin brothers or twin sisters. And that is also the reason why you can define 1 divided by 0 to be 0, and everything still works fine. It's amazing.
Wow, thank you so much. Well, I now, of course, would want to come back to the work in question, in how far does this then relate to atoms, and in how far does it relate to the cosmos? I know that we will also move to that topic with the next film and the next discussion. But do you have anything concluding to say about that one before we move to the next film?
My personal interpretation, now I really step away as a scientist, is, in a sense, Jennifer T is expressing that on the minuscule level of atoms, things very much look like the planetary level of the cosmos. So we have these kernels of atoms, of molecules, and we have electrons circling around them. It's almost like the cosmos. And so the artwork for me is trying to say, at a very miniature level, physics is very similar to the cosmic level.
Okay, I would say that's a great concluding sentence, and maybe we can come back to it with the next discussion. For now, thank you very much for joining us, even it from remotely. And bye-bye, one. And we will move to the next film.
Jellyfish, weird types of jellyfish going through the water. And sometimes they even collide and merge with each other. This artwork here provoke fantasy to rise up, to feel a little bit of magic. Science can't explain everything. I mean, we are just doing approximations and try to explain as good as we can, but of course reality is much broader than that. And also science, I mean, at least my science, physics doesn't touch on emotions. It at the same time projects you into the outer space, but also into the microspace in quantum mechanics. If you go to quantum or if you go to outer space, you immediately get into these humongous numbers, but you need lots of zeros, either behind the number or behind the comma before the number, to express your thoughts. And so it's kind of funny that here the optimization goes in different directions. Whereas a scientist would fight against all these little irregularities and would always producing exactly the same pattern. But here we would try to be precise, it would be boring, so nobody would want to look at it, yeah? Yeah, they interact here heavily with each other, and that's exactly what you would not like to have in a real EPR, quantum cryptography experiment. But that is exactly what makes this artwork here really beautiful. Science, of course, lives from getting rid of all the noise and all the imprecision and making it really dry and exact and error bars. And so art is the opposite. They want to be misunderstood because association with lots of other things is enriching art. You need something like art to connect it to emotions in human life and make it inspirational. I mean, it's already quite inspirational science, but this is a shortcut to the emotions and inspiration that are there in science. Yeah, it's perhaps enriching your experience in life. I mean, both science and art do it, and it's just another window which you shouldn't miss.
Okay, we have a bit of a, again, different situation here, which is great also to end, because this time we have both the scientists and the artists present. Well, one of the scientists, because you had also a colleague who was working together with the three of you. in this project, Guillaume Schweicher. So welcome to Florian Schreck, who is a professor of experimental quantum physics at the University of Amsterdam, and to Dmitry and Evelina, Dmitry Gelfand and Evelina Domnitch, who are working together not only on this work, right, but you are working together on art science works dealing with physics, chemistry, and computer science since quite a while already. So we already heard that Florian is actually one of those scientists who is scientist in residence within the Studiotopia project, and we also heard a bit of by Raoul what the concept behind this is. So it showed, I would say, also in the video that you already gave quite a bit of thought as to these resonances in between art and science. It was really nice to hear you reflect on that. The downside is that because we really wanted to have your statements on this in the video, much of the things you said about the work itself now didn't make it in this short version. So maybe it's also good also for the audience to learn a bit more about the concept behind the work. Also maybe explain the quite abstract, to me at least, abstract title, ER equals EPR. So now the question is, whom should I address? I guess we should address Dmitry and Evelina first, and Florian can add on if you think from your perspective of quantum physics there's something else you should elaborate on.
So the title refers to a theory. When Evelina and I had the extreme pleasure of a residency with the LIGO group at Caltech, that LIGO stands for Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. This was the group that first detected gravitational waves emanating from the collision of two black holes. And our residency was in 2016, and in 2017, this group received the Nobel Prize for this pivotal moment in the history of physics. And it was there at Caltech that we encountered Juan Maldacena, theoretical physicist, cosmologist, string theorist, who presented this radical idea that ER, which refers to Einstein-Rosen bridges, which were later known as wormholes, equals EPR, and that's Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen. That's another paper. These are two papers from 1935, which has to do with quantum entanglement. So perhaps wormholes are a manifestation of quantum entanglement, which is, of course, quite besides being a rather unorthodox take on the workings of the cosmos. It also happens to be a way towards combining the distant realms of relativity and quantum theory. And actually, at the end of his lecture, Professor Maldacena mentioned that perhaps some hydrodynamic models of this theory will emerge. And later that night, Evelina dreamt of this hydrodynamic model, and approximately a week later, we were already doing experiments in the Caltech swimming pool, having asked the swimmers to leave because they would disturb the experiment. And luckily it was quite a success, and shortly thereafter we were already starting to build the installation.
Were you literally dreaming of it?
I woke up and I saw it in my dream. And the interesting thing that Juan Maldacena, he showed a picture which was a cover of a Scientific American with an artist representation where there was some kind of a knot. So this wormhole was represented as a knot. And I found it I found this ridiculous, yeah, this cover. And what I dreamt was quite simple as this ring. And what is interesting that you do not see this wormhole, but these vortices are connected. The vortices, and
you see it in the projection.
And
however, if you look
in
closely.
Theoretical physics, even if you have a wormhole, what is a wormhole? It can connect distant realities, distant dimensions, distant worlds, but nonetheless you cannot send information over the wormhole. So somehow it exists and it doesn't exist, and it has this very ephemeral presence in our installation as well. So it's almost like a little strangeness in space-time, strangeness in topology. That's where the rotation of water happens.
So do you see your work as illustrating that theory? Is that one of the main aims of the work then?
Certainly not. We believe that a well-conceived, well-executed scientific experiment is a work of art. We don't. We actually, unlike perhaps many other standpoints, Evelina and I went into this domain over 20 years ago because we don't find any significant differences. We mainly see quite some parallels, but we never engage in illustration, and for that matter we consider all of our work to exist in a realm of abstraction that cannot represent anything at all, that is open to any kind of interpretation. Yes, you can enter the room, and of course, given the background of that is alluded to by the title, you can go into cosmology and into this recent theory, but you can also view it purely from an aesthetic and perceptual standpoint.
I was a naive observer. I just entered this room knowing about this title, and you first get a feeling of awe just by the sound and the patterns on the ceiling, and you forget that it's actually called EPR, and you stand there for 15 minutes just looking at it, how does it work, and playing with it before you again remember the title and then make the connections to the physics again. So it works.
So you have not been involved in the coming into being of this work, Florian?
No.
No. So because your scientist residency is rather just starting?
Yes, right.
So what do you, both sides, do you both hope of getting from that cooperation from your residency?
For me it's like this. I was always interested in art, but more as a passive observer, going to contemporary art exhibitions, or my family, they are all involved with art. But now I'm actively involved. I'm entering this world through you, with your help. So that's very interesting for me. It's just expanding my horizon. And we just started the journey of building an artwork. So I hope we will produce something beautiful, just as what you did before.
Yes, and we're working on an artwork that can unveil a little bit, bring to the scale of our senses the movement of light in space. So the
vorticity of light.
Yes.
So it is actually in many ways related. Well, we have a quite a fascination with vortices, and it's.
Yes, so it engages vortices, but created by single light waves. And to your question about theory and illustration of theory, we have to keep in mind that our theories and science, it's just games of our mind, approximations, that reality is so much bigger and broader, and of course our fascination is with reality, but the way it corresponds with the working of our consciousness, with understanding, it's also great. And I like how in the video Florian says that, oh, if you try to make it always spin the same way, that would be boring. But no matter how you try, you would never succeed, exactly because of this. And the fact that you are caught in this process of cosmogony, the universe being created together with you in the moment, where you can make an analog of spinning black holes and observe it and think about quantum mechanics and some of the mathematics, yes, dividing by zero, and that's what happened when black holes, when the Einstein equation of general relativity was solved by the German scientist Schwarzschild, who was dying in the Russian-German front somewhere around between St. Petersburg and Moscow, and he wrote in 1915 a letter from the front to Albert Einstein. It was a few days apart from an opening of exhibition in St. Petersburg
in Petrograd.
In Petrograd, yes. That was called 0.10. And the interesting thing that the name of the exhibition was spelled in numbers, so not as letters, 10 or 0. So yes, this is this fascinating quest, how these things can happen in parallel. The black square of Malevich, where he claimed he had reached
the zero of form.
And the solution of the equation of the general relativity that gave us the first model of a black hole, the Schwarzschild radius. And what is very interesting in the black holes and zero is this moment of singularity, where not only the laws of nature break down, but our understanding of these laws of mathematics sort of breaks down.
Because actually around a black hole, it is actually space-time itself that is being warped. That just like around a liquid vortex, as in the installation, the actual fabric of the cosmos is being folded in upon itself.
If I hear you, I have to say, I feel that, well, you are the quantum physicists, you are also the historians of science and maybe the art historians, and also if I hear Florian talking, it seems that you rather feel the apprentice in this, in this interaction. So is that the case, or maybe to the two of you, what do you hope to get also from Florian? That what could you help with that is still something that you need to figure out?
Well, Florian's, he is such an accomplished scientist, and if I can tell you what his lab is working on, you will be so impressed, because he just created an atom laser, and he is building the most precise clock that will work with the help of an atom laser. So this is a multi-million-dollar projects of like the most pioneering research projects. So of course it's fantastic to have such an apprentice at our studio.
We have much to learn from our apprentice.
But I can also learn from you about the creativity and bouncing ideas, and yeah.
So there is nothing, Florian, you would say yes, but you didn't really, this is really something you should take into account from quantum physics, because that's an interesting theoretical angle that I think you missed up until now. Or
what Evelina and Dmitry have to take into account is precision and sometimes calculate before trying to do something, but we work on this together.
Yes, we're exactly working on it right now.
We need a lot of precision for what we're working on with Florian, indeed. Yeah.
That's interesting, because then in the end result, that was what you were fascinated by, that actually it's not about precision in this work, but in the
you
process sometimes you
reach
might
a certain level, otherwise it just doesn't work.
And I know that our curators also needed a lot of precision to take care of all the works here in the exhibitions, in the end, even if they don't stage that precision in the aesthetics, in the end, of course, these works need a lot of maintenance and a lot of very exact exactness in the creation.
Well, they're doing a fabulous job. We have rarely seen this piece in such a state after several months on display, and yeah, definitely. Big hats off to them.
They really appreciate hearing that, and that's maybe also the moment to get them on stage again. But first, maybe let's see if there is questions.
There's one new question just coming in. the work has been heavily influenced by science, do you think art and artworks like ER equals ER EPR can also influence or inspire science in return?
Well, that
maybe Florian can
Florian.
answer this.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think, of course, of how we could do things like this in ultra-cold atom experiments, my type of experiment. So vortices, and I mean, that has been done, of course, already, but if it hadn't, it would, of course, be the inspiration. Yeah. I think it's just putting you in a playful mindset, looking at this artwork or talking to artists, and that is something you need for science too.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm sorry we already need to wrap up here, but we also don't want to make this too long, because we know that people, especially when listening from home, it's sometimes shouldn't get too long at least. So thanks. And yeah, now I invite the two curators of the exhibition and Raoul to me for a brief wrap up. We don't have so much time actually, because we promised to be done by 6, which probably won't fully work out, but I think we can take 5 to 10 minutes for at least some first reflections. I mean, this is a work in progress, I think, for everybody in setting up this gallery, but also this kind of conversation. So we luckily don't need to come to final conclusions. But do you have any first reactions or comments on the various voices that have been voiced today?
Well, frankly, I'm quite overwhelmed by all the very interesting speeches that we have heard, the discussions between the artists and the scientists, and it brings the collaboration even more alive than it already was in the exhibition. So yeah, that's actually.
Yeah. Maybe before we move to the others, of course, there's also space for both the on-site audience and the online audience to ask questions now. So if anybody of you has a question, there's a mic here, and anybody online, you can still type in the chat. But while you do so, we can also hear from Raoul and Maria.
Please.
Ladies first? Okay. No, it's really good actually to have this kind of discussion, because as we sometimes mention during this process, the voices of the artists were missing into these movies, and it has been great to have the artists here. Okay, it's a pity because Jennifer couldn't make it, but it was great to have also the artists here, because it's important in this dialogue between art science that really you have both parts dialoguing with one another, and also because yes, it's something which is still a work in progress, of course, but it's also super exciting to have this space in which it is really possible to experiment it with this art science that is really timely at the moment. There are a lot of exhibitions and initiatives that are really focusing on this art science. So it's really great to have this this gallery here at the FU, actually, because it's also something that can encourage the collaboration of students, of researchers, and could be also this space of growth, and that can really bring something unique to the university, also for students to experiment, and not only with curating, but also to propose maybe, I don't know, research that can combine both fields. Yeah.
Thank you. Raoul?
Yeah, I completely concur with what Maria said. It's for me this symposium was really a treat. I was really enjoying myself, and I hope the audience as well. It is really a show, don't tell. I mean, we say that it is so nice that artists and scientists work together, that there's this dialogue, that we learn from these type of creative minds. But in fact, if you just look at what we heard today, that was for me showing that. And it was really very, very interesting and very nice to hear. Also because of your moderation, of course, which I'm also very grateful of.
Yes, true. Okay, well, I try to do my best, of course, but it's, and I find it, I mean, it's also easy if you have interesting partners to talk with, and it was so many different voices, which also makes it interesting. I mean, I think there's many things that we could go on to discuss, but of course there will also be other occasions. But maybe there is some reactions from anybody in the audience.
Not online at this moment.
Okay, so the online audience tells us, please, can we get done with this? This has already been 2 hours, but...
Actually, I have one question, which I haven't heard the answer yet in the previous conversations, but I was really curious, question to the artists that are here, if this kind of movies, have you ever experienced this before, that a scientist is actually watching your work and analyze it like this? And I would really like to know if you liked it, if it brings you further. Do you want to do it again, or so? How was the experience for the artist?
Dimitri's getting up, so please go to the mic.
I thought it was a brilliant idea, and I know who was the origin of this idea. It was Raoul Fraser here, who of course is an accomplished biophysicist himself, and in some ways Evelina and I feel as though we have dragged him into this domain and as a result he has surprised us quite significantly with this with these video interviews, but they're much more than that. I think that they give people a clue about the outlandish work that we all do.
Thanks, Dimitri.
Thank you.
We have a question from online, and that is, why do you suppose it took tens of thousands of years to invent the zero as a number? It's a question, I think, to all of you here, not raised to one person specifically, but I have to think.
What was the question?
Why do you think it took tens of thousands of years to invent this number zero really as a number?
I think that's more a question to the Zero Origin Foundation, which is one of our partners, but there's no one from
was not
here.
No, indeed. But if I may attempt to respond to this question, it was not that. Okay, so the term invented, it's a bit problematic as a term, because it's a bit of a colonial term, let's say. So just as a first, as a premise to say, but it really doesn't took that long, because Babylonians had already the placeholder for the zero. Let's say that mathematically wise, having the weight of being recognized as a number took that long, but actually there was already the zero, both in Babylonians, in Maya's society, and there were also different shapes. And it's really also nice how this placeholder zero really had also different shapes according to different places. So it's not that it took that long to invent it, the zero, but it took that long to give the zero this mathematical weight. So it was just not, a space, an empty space between numbers, but also it's possible to make mathematical operations with the zero. So if this might answer the question. Otherwise, we have this fantastic Zero project, and they are doing, for the audience online and offline, they are doing this amazing conference workshop on Zero, which is being held parallelly to the exhibition, actually, and they are really going deep into the history of Zero, and also, of course, all the aspects related to this migration, let's say, of the Zero. So I invite you to check also the program online of the conference workshop. Yeah.
I hope the question was answered this way.
And I think that the really good thing that this question shows is that the exhibition got people interested not only in art-science collaboration, but also in the topic of the exhibition itself. And that's, of course, something very important to keep in mind, that these collaborations are not done just for the sake of collaborating, but because there are really interesting topics to engage with from in these interactions, in these collaborations in between artists, academics, scientists, and a broader audience. So I think that this is why I really like this question as a final question, because it goes back to the topic that you have chosen for this first exhibition in this space. So maybe we can take this to round off, and I give you the word to for some closing words.
Yeah, for this first hybrid art science event, I think it went very well. It was I think very interesting. We had nice stories from everyone, and I would thank you all so much for participating in this. The scientist, the artist, Raoul from the Art Science Lab, Maria, my steun en toeverlaat, I don't know the English word, but you were amazing in co-curating this exhibition and also organizing this event. And Katja, thank you so much for moderating. Sam and all the technical guys behind there somewhere, thank you very much. Let's have more of these events, I would say. Thank you everybody.